This story comes from Politico.com. It is about the U.S.-China trade war. They say here in the title, don't mention the trade war. What China doesn't want people to know in its dispute with the U.S. So this is a story that is published by Politico as a part of a content partnership with the South China Morning Post. It originally appeared on scmp.com on July 15, 2018. China's censors are scrambling to control the narrative about the trade war with the U.S. by giving the media a list of do's and don'ts when reporting on the topic, sources have said. So we know that China they have been historically a communist country, and I believe on the surface they're more of a democratic republic, but there are still signs of censorship, especially in terms of geopolitical and therefore economic topics that are occurring in this trade war. So on this, they gave that disclaimer just to show that they are being as objective as possible in this report. You can never be too sure. That's why it's important to look at several sources on the same topic. But it starts off here with 4 separate sources working for Chinese media who were briefed on these internal instructions told the South China Morning Post that they were told not to over-report the trade war with the U.S. and be extremely careful about linking the trade war to stock market fails, the depreciation of the yuan, or economic weakness to avoid spreading panic. When you report a fall in the stock market index or a weakening in the yuan's exchange rate, you can't use trade war in your headline, one source with an official Chinese media outlet who declined to be named said. Of course they declined to be named. A separate source said China's control of public discourse about the trade war, an issue too big to be ignored completely, has gone beyond a white or black approach and aims to be more subtle. Different media organizations were granted different levels of leeway in covering the trade war, the source said. So they say now state media outlets with a higher political ranking are allowed to publish news and editorials about the trade war, while local media and internet news portals are often told to republish what state media have already published and not to overplay the issue. So they're trying to downplay the issue. But you know what? They're doing the same thing here. I don't know how Politico, if their aim in this article is to point fingers at China and look what China's doing. They're censoring their citizens. They're doing the same thing here every other day or every day, really. If you look at social media or mainstream media, mainstream media is pretty much on its way out. But because we're going into more of digital, internet-based, freestanding, non-terrestrial media, but you see stupid mess all day. We even on the non-terrestrial media platforms, you see just idiotic chaos all day. And you almost get to the point where you have to sift through that mess to get to real information and obtain real knowledge about what's going on in the world. So if they're trying to criticize the Chinese for doing the exact same thing, then that's a hypocrite, by any other words. That's what I would call it. But I don't want to accuse Politico of doing that. It just sounds like that could be what it is. So they're not really talking about Trump too much, but let's see what they have to say in this next section. Now, they say here, for instance, publishing an instant translation of what President Donald Trump has posted on Twitter, a site that is banned in China, may be seen as an offense, the source said. They do the same thing on CNN. Okay. Trump heightened trade hostilities this week by threatening to target another $200 billion in Chinese goods with additional tariffs, which pushed a concerned Beijing to rejig its rhetoric, moving away from a triumphalist tone to portraying itself as a victim of a reckless leader. China's Ministry of Commerce on Thursday night issued a statement defending itself, arguing that its trade surplus with the U.S. was not its fault and denying that it had stolen technology from the U.S. or that it had forced foreign companies to transfer their technology. China had tried its best to avoid a trade war with maximum sincerity and patience, but the U.S. side shattered an earlier consensus for domestic political needs, the statement continued. Okay, I'm not going to even try to pronounce this. Okay, yeah. So it says Zia Kadao, I guess, a social media platform run by the official People's Daily newspaper, picked up the statement and published it on its Weibo account just before midnight on Thursday, adding a picture of Trump. The post attracted hundreds of comments, mostly criticizing Beijing for the way it was handling the trade war. This report from the Ministry of Commerce is as cheap as a hysterical woman cursing randomly on the street, another user named Boy Zhang commented. By Friday afternoon, it had attracted 1,484 comments, but these were no longer visible to viewers. It's just brainwashing. They impose their conclusions but provide no evidence, one user named Charming Knight of the 23 Bridges said. Beijing is taking a softer approach to deal with the U.S. compared with its previous tactic of making public attacks and launching popular boycotts, which has been used against Japan, South Korea, and the Philippines in the past. China has already told its media to tone down its coverage of Made in China 2025, a plan to boost its high-tech sector that has frequently been criticized by the U.S., and to shun personal attacks on Trump in the hopes of de-escalating the situation. So they're basically trying to pacify their people. They don't really want them to get too hostile because they also realize that there are a lot of people who need those visas to get over to the U.S. to work and to go to school. They're not completely, they ain't completely lost it yet. I think also that China is being very strategic in this way within, internally within, because they're keeping their people on code. That's how I see it. But in the long run, it's going to probably hurt them because politically, because the people won't know much of what's going on outside of China. They're going back to, looks like the early stages of them going back to their isolation after the Opium War in China against the Europeans, specifically the British. You had China go into isolation phase. Excuse me. I believe it was the British, and they after that determined, right after the Opium Wars, the Chinese pretty much culled their coons and got rid of anyone who was not on code and isolated themselves. And it looks like that's maybe one thing they're doing now, the first stages of their second isolation phase. They go on to say, while China has retaliated against Trump's first batch of tariffs on $34 billion worth of products with a similar levy of its own, it has prioritized its message that it is an innocent victim in this dispute. It is also keen to portray itself as a firm believer in free trade and is seeking support from other countries in pushing back against Trump's unilateralism. Former Deputy Commerce Minister Wei Jingguo said he was not aware of debate being suppressed, but said it's important now to let Chinese businesses and citizens to know that only by opening up, we can achieve high quality growth. Yeah, and when you all were opening up, we see there were a lot of issues with that. If you go back to Mao Zedong, many other leaders of China during the communist regime that they had established. When they did open up, there were issues. So I don't know. I'll keep an eye on this to see where it's going. It's hard to tell how it's going to affect us on the ground. It seems more like a trade war that will affect investments and corporations at a higher level. But you all let me know what you think in the comment section. Like, comment, share, subscribe, and I'll talk to you in the next one.